So good morning and welcome. My name is Reverend Dr. Ron Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to our Sunday celebration for the Center for Spiritual Living Space Coast. And if there's anybody listening now or who's going to listen this week, if you've never been to a Center for Spiritual Living before, we believe there's one God, many paths to that God, and we're here to love, honor, and support you no matter what your divine path is. And the Center for Spiritual Living Space Coast is a safe haven for people of all beliefs and lifestyles, whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on your journey of faith, you're welcome here. And so as we do every week, we're going to begin our service with a prayer and a spiritual reading. And this week, our two practitioners, Edgar and Patrice Rivera, are going to open us up. So guys, whenever you're ready.
So as we just take that deep breath in, sink back, noticing the chair beneath our legs, beneath our back, sinking down, that place of remembering. For the truth is, there's only that one presence, that one song, that one painting, that one paintbrush, that one effervescent energy that is everywhere present, always present, here, now, everywhere, inside of every heart, inside of every cell. There is no spot where God is not. And so knowing that truth, I absolutely know the truth that I therefore have to be part of that one. Everything I see has to be part of that one, for that is truly all there is. And so as I stand in this place of knowing that oneness, I rejoice in the oneness of this community. I rejoice in the oneness of this world. I rejoice in the oneness of the reverberation of the sound of every utterance that comes out in this collective like-minded souls. I rejoice in the words of Reverend Ron Fox and what he imparts upon our hearts for us to remember our truth, for us to go forth in each and every moment, remembering the truth, not only for each and every one of us, but for each and every one who maybe doesn't remember their truth. We remember it for them, for we know that that is truly all there is. And in this place of rejoicing, I am so grateful. My heart is so open wide. And in that, I am truly, truly grateful for taking in everything of beauty and magnificence there is to take in. And so in this place of absolute gratitude, I release, I step out of the way, and I know that I allow the divine to do what the divine does, work in and through me. And so it is.
The great teacher lived in the spiritual world just as normally as we live in the material, and just as consciously. What is the spiritual world? And where is it? It is right here, could we but see it. Behind everything material stands the spiritual, supporting it, and without which there could be no material.
Thank you. So my title today is The Search for Heaven. And when I think about it, I remember when I was a young kid, my parents used to watch Ed Sullivan. There was a comedian who used to come on, and part of his routine, he would sing a song. And the title of his song was, "Everybody wants to get to heaven, but nobody wants to die." And it struck me, the truth behind that, how ambivalent a topic it is. And I just would like to, as part of my message today, just say, maybe we don't have to die to get to heaven. So I want to open with a quote from Ernest Holmes, who founded the Centers for spiritual living. And many years ago, he wrote, "The solution to every problem is within man. The healing of all disease is within man. The forgiveness of all sin is within man. The raising of the dead is within man. Heaven is within man." And that's why Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." And so one of the things I did this week in preparing this message, I went back into the glossary of the Science of Mind, which Holmes wrote in 1927, or it's published in 27. And I looked up in the glossary his definition of heaven and the kingdom of God. And so here's part of his definition of heaven: a state of happiness. Heaven is within. Heaven is not a place with streets of gold or gates of pearl. Heaven is a state of being. And under kingdom, he defined it as the recognition of oneness with the divine. And in the Bible, Jesus has few parables about heaven. And one of them, he says that the kingdom of heaven is like a field with a treasure hidden in the field. And a man finds it and sells all his possessions so he can buy the field. And the lesson in that parable is that when we find the kingdom of heaven in our consciousness, we're glad to leave everything else behind us. When we discover the treasure, a whole new world opens for us. We release all our old beliefs and we can begin a whole new way of living. So Wayne Muller, who's a wonderful spiritual writer, writes about heaven also, and he says that in Jesus, heaven was being awake in our everyday life. And he said that heaven is already here in the bread we eat, in the seeds we plant, in the small blessings that we receive every day. And he said, in Jesus' heaven, everyone is welcome. The poor, the unclean, the sinners, the prostitutes, the tax collectors. We're all invited, he said, to be in heaven and to live kindly, to feed the hungry, to heal the sick, to visit the prisoner, to comfort the lonely, and to welcome the stranger. So I want to give you a different perspective. I told you about Timothy's song when I started this. Let me give you a different perspective about heaven from a Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh. Listen to what he wrote about heaven. He said, "There are some people who believe that they will enter the kingdom of God after they die. I don't agree with them. I know that you don't have to die in order to get into the kingdom of God. In fact, I think you have to be alive to do so." Think about that. So maybe many of you have heard this before, but I want to tell you a story about heaven and hell. So an angel gives somebody a tour of heaven and hell, and they go to hell first. And when they're down there, what this man sees are table after table of a banquet with all of the most wonderful and scrumptious foods that you could ever imagine. And they're all set out on these large rectangular tables, and people are sitting on both sides of the table. And one of the other factors is all of the people have long sticks attached to them from their shoulder all the way down to their hands. So they can't bend their arms. And so all they can do day after day is look at this scrumptious food and not be able to touch it. And after a while, the angel takes this man to heaven. And when they get to heaven, it's the exact same picture. Table after table of absolutely delicious looking, wonderful food, and on long rectangular tables, and people sitting on both sides of the table. The difference is in heaven, the people, and they also have the same sticks. The difference is in heaven, people are feeding each other. A simple act of compassion turns hell into heaven. Carolyn Mays is a spiritual writer, an intuitive, and she comes from a Catholic background. And in her book, Entering the Castle, she says that hell isn't a place we go to. She says it's a case of mistaken identity, that we forget who and what we really are. And she says heaven is discovering the realization of our inner divine self, that the mystics all tell us that the kingdom of heaven is within us, and that realizing that is why Jesus said, I am and the Father are one. The divine self is one with all that is. And I saw something this week that really touched me by another Catholic teacher, Joseph Cardinal Bernardine. And he said, sometimes people come to me and ask me what heaven and the afterlife are like. And he said, it always makes me smile because I really don't know any better than they do. And honestly, when I read that, there's more to this, but when I read it, it reminded me in times past that I've done, rather than doing a message like this, I've done Stump the Minister. And one day somebody asked me, what's it like after we die? And I thought, how do I answer that question? I haven't died yet. And so Cardinal Bernardine smiles and says, I don't know it really any more than anybody else about it. But he says, I did have an old memory. And he said the memory was the first time I went back and visited the place where both my parents were born in northern Italy. He said, I felt as though I had been there before. And I looked around, when I looked around at the scenery and the mountains, when I entered the valley, I said to myself, I know this place. I'm home. And he said, I believe that when we cross over from this life to the next, that's exactly the way we're going to feel and what we're going to say. I'm home. Wayne Dyer, in one of his books, writes about Epictetus, who's a philosopher and a former slave, and he believed that we're all part of God. We're all a divine spark, and that if God is everywhere, that includes you and me. And when we believe that, we claim not just our divinity, but we claim the power of God. And Dyer says, most of us grew up to see God as a giant vending machine in the sky, that he was a man with a beard sitting on a throne. And that if we deposit a token into the vending machine, and in this case, the token is our prayer, that sometimes God delivers and sometimes God didn't deliver. And in that scenario, in that belief system, it's obvious that God is separate from ourselves. But Epictetus believed, and he shifted the emphasis to us being a fragment of God. So I want to share with you a Zen story. And the story is about a monk who's sitting by a tree on a sunny day meditating, and a samurai comes to him and says rather gruffly, "You, teach me about heaven and hell." And the little monk looks up at the samurai and says, "Me teach you? You're dirty. You stink. You're a disgrace. I can't teach you anything." And the samurai is furious. He takes out his sword and he lifts it over his head. And when he gets to the highest point, just before he's going to bring it down, the little monk looks at him and says, "That is hell." And the samurai realizes that the little monk was willing to risk his life to teach him something. And he's so overcome. He puts down his sword, and a tear starts to flow from his eye down his cheek. And the little monk looks at him and says, "And that is heaven." The samurai's heart breaks open when he experiences the love and the compassion coming from this little monk. So I thought it would be interesting. Now, we might not be able to complete, this might not work as we do it this morning, because I'm going to have to abbreviate it a little. But I wanted to share with you a technique that I learned for reaching within to that kingdom of heaven, to reaching within for inner wisdom. So I would invite you all to sit comfortably and to close your eyes and visualize a corridor, and know that this corridor is a safe place. And as you go down, there are several doors. And one of the doors on the left-hand side is labeled the Hall of Wisdom. Open the door and enter. And the room looks like a small movie theater. The seats are really comfortable. And when you sit down, you realize there's a keyboard at your fingertips. Type in any question you wish to address. And then look at the screen in front of you, and there will be an answer. And if nothing comes, sit for a while. Sometimes it takes time. I'll give you a little time. So again, if nothing comes, sit for a while, or try it again later and give it some time. And sometimes the answers really surprise us, because what we know and what we realize is the answers are coming from beyond our lineal mind. They're coming from a really special place. James Redfield and Michael Murphy wrote a book called God and the Evolving Universe. And in the book, they say that many of the world's great philosophers, poets, and religious figures, they describe having an experience that's greater than their calling, that's greater than their self, that moves them beyond their own identity, that somehow they had a new connection, a deeper reality of life. And let me give you how two people explain that in their own words. So Meister Eckhart said, "For the ground of God and the ground of the soul are one and the same. The eye with which I see God is the same eye from which God sees me." And Martha Graham, the late dancer, she put it in terms of inspiration. And she said, it's where we're all swept away with an inner sense of excitement about something we're doing or want to do. I'm betting we all have felt that. What we're working on seems alive. We know something transcendent is moving within us. Jonathan Robinson is an author who wrote a book, and he's had several New York Times bestsellers. And he wrote a book that he actually edited. That's a better way to put it. He edited it. And it's called The Experience of God. And what he did, he wrote to a bunch of people in different fields, some religious, some show business, all different fields, and he asks them questions. And just to give you an idea, some of the people he wrote to: Joan Borisenko, Ram Dass, Pat Boone, Wayne Dyer, and many more. And I just want to share a couple of answers from two questions he asked. So one of the questions was, how I encounter God. And here's some of the answers. Through nature, I feel the wind in my face. And one of the women wrote, I just became a grandmother for the third time. I encounter God through eye contact with my laboring daughter. Holding her hand, breathing with her is like looking into the face of God. Somebody else wrote, in nature, behind the eyes of everyone I meet. In meditation, when I release thoughts that are unlike God. And another question he asked, he said, my spiritual advice is, somebody wrote, love yourself. Someone else wrote, seek his will rather than your own. Somebody else wrote, be gentle with ourselves. Quiet down inner dialogue. And lastly, release all judgment and practice forgiveness. So I want to close with a piece that I've done before. I like to do this once or twice a year. I find it so meaningful and so touching. And it was written by James Dillard Freeman, who is known as the Poet Laureate of Unity. And he wrote this. His wife was very, very ill in the hospital. And he went to the chapel at Unity Village, and he sat there. And he said, this is the only time this ever happened to him. But as he sat there, he literally could hear the voice of God dictating this to him. And he simply took out a pad and a pen and he wrote it down. And it's titled, "Do You Need Me? I Am There." Do you need me? I am there. You cannot see me, yet I am the light you see by. You cannot hear me, yet I speak through your voice. You cannot feel me, yet I am the power at work in your hands. I am at work, though you do not understand my ways. I am at work, though you do not recognize my works. I am not strange visions. I am not mysteries. Only in absolute stillness, beyond self, can you know me as I am. And then, but as a feeling and a faith. Yet I am here. Yet I am there. Yet I answer. When you need me, I am there. Even if you deny me, I am there. Even when you feel most alone, I am there. Even in your fears, I am there. Even in your pain, I am there. I am there when you pray and when you do not pray. Though your faith in me is unsure, my faith in you never wavers, because I know you, because I love you. Beloved, I am there. God bless you. Thank you for being here, and have a wonderful week.